Sansuigyo, the Sutra of Mountains and Water, by Eihei Dogen. From Shobogenzo, the Treasury of the True Dharma Eye. The mountains and water of the present are the realization of the words of eternal Buddhas. Both mountains and water abide in place in the Dharma, having realized ultimate virtue. Because they are in the state before the kalpa of emptiness, they are vigorous activity in the present. Because they are the self before the sprouting of creation, they are real liberation. The virtues of the mountains are so high and wide that we always realize moral virtue which can ride the clouds by relying on the mountains. And we unfailingly liberate the subtle effectiveness which follows the wind by relying on the mountains. Master Kai of Taozan Mountain preaches to the assembly, quote, "The blue mountains are constantly walking. The stone woman bears children by night." End quote. Mountains lack none of the virtues with which mountains should be equipped. For this reason, they are constantly abiding in stillness and constantly walking. You must painstakingly learn in practice the virtue of this walking. The walking of mountains must be like the walking of human beings. Therefore, even though it does not look like human walking, do not doubt the walking of mountains. The words preached now by the Buddhist patriarch are already pointing to walking, and this is his attachment of the fundamental. We should pursue to the ultimate his preaching to the assembly about constant walking. It is because the mountains are walking that they are constant. The walking of the blue mountains is swifter than the wind, but human beings in the mountains do not sense it or know it. Being in the mountains describes the opening of flowers in the real world. People out of the mountains never sense it and never know it. People who have no eyes to see the mountains do not sense, do not know, do not see, and do not hear this concrete fact. If we doubt the walking of the mountains, we also do not yet know our own walking. It is not that we do not have our own walking. We do not yet know and have not yet clarified our own walking. When we know our own walking, then we will surely also know the walking of the blue mountains. The blue mountains are already beyond the sentient and beyond the insentient. We cannot doubt the present walking of the blue mountains. Though we do not know how many Dharma worlds we should use as a scale when taking in the blue mountains, we should investigate in detail the walking of the blue mountains, as well as our own walking. There should be investigation both of backward steps and of stepping backward. We should investigate the fact that just at the moment before the sprouting of creation, and since before the king of emptiness, Walking, in forward steps and backward steps, has never stopped, even for an instant. If the walking ceased, the Buddhist patriarchs could not manifest themselves in reality. If there were an end to the walking, the Buddha Dharma could not reach the present day. Forward walking never ceases, and backward walking never ceases. The moment of forward walking does not oppose backward walking, and the moment of backward walking does not oppose forward walking. We call this virtue the mountains flowing, and we call it the flowing mountains. The Blue Mountains master in practice the act of walking, and the East Mountain learns in practice the act of moving on water. Therefore, this learning in practice is the mountains learning in practice. The mountains, without changing their body and mind, with the face and eyes of mountains, have been travelling around learning in practice. Never insult them by saying that the Blue Mountains cannot walk, or that the East Mountain cannot move on water. It is because of the grossness of the viewpoint of the vulgar that they doubt the phrase, "the Blue Mountains are walking." It is due to the poorness of their scant experience that they are astonished at the words "flowing mountains." Now, not even fully understanding the words "flowing water," they are drowned in prejudice and ignorance. This being so, they esteem as defining concepts, and esteem as lifeblood, their enumeration of the accumulated virtues of mountains. The act of walking exists. The act of flowing exists. And the moment in which mountains give birth to mountain children exist. By virtue of the fact that mountains become Buddhist patriarchs have manifested themselves in reality like this. Though there may be eyes in which grass, trees, soil, stones, fences and walls are realized, that moment is beyond doubt and beyond disturbance. It is not total realization. Though moments are realized in which the mountains are seen to be adorned with the 7 treasures, those mountains are not the real refuge. Though visions are realized of the mountains as the area in which Buddhas practice the truth, those visions are not necessarily something to be loved. Though some have got the brains to realize a vision of the mountains as the unthinkable merit of the Buddhas, reality is not merely this. Every realization is an instance of object and subject. We do not esteem such realizations as the Buddhist patriarchs' action in the state of truth. They are one-sided and narrow views. The moving of circumstances and the moving of mind are criticized by the great saint. Explanations of mind and explanations of the nature are not affirmed by the Buddhist patriarchs. Seeing the mind and seeing the nature is the animated activity of non-Buddhists. Staying in words and staying in phrases is not the speech of liberation. There is a state which has got free from states like these. It is expressed, quote, "The blue mountains are constantly walking," unquote, and, quote, "The East Mountain moves on water," unquote. We should master it in detail. In the words, "The stone woman bears children by night," time, in which the stone woman bears children, is called night. In general, there are male stones and female stones, and there are neither male nor female stones, whose practical function supports the heavens and supports the earth. There are heavenly stones and there are earthly stones, as the secular say, but few people know. We should know the facts of childbirth. At the time of childbirth, are parent and child both transformed? How could we learn in practice only that childbirth is realized as the parent becoming the parent of a child? We should learn in practice and should penetrate to the end that the time of the child becoming the child of the parent is the practice and experience of the reality of childbirth. Great Master Unmon Kyoshin says, quote, "The East Mountain moves on water," unquote. The point realized in these words is that all mountains are an East Mountain, and every East Mountain moves on water. Thus, mountains such as the 9 mountains of Mount Sumeru have been realized, and they have been practiced and experienced. This state is called the East Mountain. Nevertheless, how could Unmon be liberated in the skin, flesh, bones and marrow, the practice and experience, and the vigorous activity of the East Mountain? At the present time, in the great kingdom of Sung, there is a group of unreliable fellows who have now formed such a crowd that they cannot be beaten by a few real people. They say that the present talk of the East Mountain moving on water, and stories such as Nansen's sickle, are stories beyond rational understanding. Their idea is as follows, quote, "A story which involves images and thoughts is not a Zen story of the Buddhist patriarchs. Stories beyond rational understanding are the stories of the Buddhist patriarchs. This is why we esteem Obaku's use of the stick and Rinzai's shout, which are beyond rational understanding and which do not involve images and thoughts, as the great realization before the sprouting of creation. The reason that the expedient means of many past masters employ tangle cutting phrases is that those phrases are beyond rational understanding." Unquote. Those fellows who speak like this have never met a true teacher, and they have no eyes of learning in practice. They are small dogs who do not deserve to be discussed. For the last 200 or 300 years, in the land of Sung, there have been many such demons and shavelings like these in the band of 6. It is pitiful that the great truth of the Buddhist patriarch is going to ruin. The understanding of these shavelings is inferior even to that of Shravakas of the small vehicle. They are more stupid than non-Buddhists. They are not lay people, they are not monks, they are not human beings, and they are not gods. They are more stupid than animals learning the Buddha's truth. What the shavelings call stories beyond rational understanding are beyond rational understanding only to them. The Buddhist patriarchs are not like that. Even though rational ways are not rationally understood by those shavelings, we should not fail to learn in practice the Buddhist patriarchs' ways of rational understanding. If ultimately there is no rational understanding, the reasoning which those shavelings have now set forth also cannot hit the target. There are many of this sort in all directions of Sung China, and I have seen and heard them before my own eyes. They are pitiful. They do not know that images and thoughts are words and phrases, and they do not know that words and phrases transcend images and thoughts. When I was in China, I laughed at them, but they had nothing to say for themselves and were just wordless. Their present negation of rational understanding is nothing but a false notion. Who has taught it to them? Though they lack a natural teacher, they have the non-Buddhist view of naturalism. Remember this, the East Mountain moves on water, is the bones and marrow of the Buddhist patriarchs. Waters are realized at the foot of the East Mountain. Thereupon, mountains ride the clouds and walk through the sky. The crowns of the waters are mountains, whose walking, upward or downward, is always on water. Because the mountain's toes can walk over all kinds of water, making the waters dance, the walking is free in all directions. And practice and experience is not non-existent. Water is neither strong nor weak, neither wet nor dry, neither moving nor still, neither cold nor warm, neither existent nor non-existent, neither delusion nor realization. When it is solid, it is harder than a diamond. Who could break it? Melted, it is softer than diluted milk. Who could break it? This being so, it is impossible to doubt the real virtues that water possesses. For the present, we should learn in practice the moments in which it is possible to put on the eyes and look in the 10 directions at the water of the 10 directions. This is not learning in practice only of the time when human beings and gods see water. There is learning in practice of water seeing water. Because water practices and experiences water, there is the investigation in practice of water speaking water. We should manifest in reality the path on which self encounters self. We should advance and retreat along the vigorous path on which the external world exhausts in practice the external world, and we should spring free. In general, Ways of seeing mountains and water differ according to the type of being that sees them. There are beings which see what we call water as a string of pearls, but this does not mean that they see a string of pearls as water. They probably see as their water a form that we see as something else. We see their strings of pearls as water. There are beings which see water as wonderful flowers, but this does not mean that they use flowers as water. Demons see water as raging flames and see it as pus and blood. Dragons and fish see it as a palace and see it as a tower. Some see water as the seven treasures and the Mani gem. Some see it as trees and forests and fences and walls. Some see it as the pure and liberated Dharma nature. Some see it as the real human body, and some see it as the oneness of physical form and mental nature. Human beings see it as water, the causes and conditions of death and life. Thus, what is seen does indeed differ according to the kind of being that sees. Now, let us be wary of this. Is it that there are various ways of seeing one object? Or is it that we have mistakenly assumed the various images to be one object? At the crown of effort, we should make still further effort. If the above is so, then practice and experience and pursuit of the truth also may not be only of one kind or of two kinds, and the ultimate state also may be of thousands of kinds and myriad varieties. When we keep this point in mind, although there are many kinds of water, it seems that there is no original water and no water of many kinds. At the same time, the various waters which accord with the kinds of beings that see water do not depend on mind, do not depend on body, do not arise from karma, are not self-reliant, and are not reliant upon others. They have the liberated state of reliance on water itself. This being so, water is beyond earth, water, fire, wind, space, consciousness, and so on. Water is beyond blue, yellow, red, white, or black, and beyond sights, sounds, smells, tastes, sensations, or properties. At the same time, as earth, water, fire, wind, space, and so on, water is naturally realized. Because the nations and palaces of the present are like this, it may be difficult to state by what and into what they are created. To assert that they hang on the circle of space and the circle of wind is not true to ourselves and not true to others. It is to speculate on the basis of the suppositions of the small view. People make this assertion because they think that Without somewhere to hang, dharmas would not be able to abide. The Buddha says, all dharmas are ultimately liberated. They are without an abode. Remember, although they are in the state of liberation, without any bonds, all dharmas are abiding in place. Even so, when human beings look at water, the only way we see it is as flowing ceaselessly. This flowing takes many forms, each of which is an example of the human view. Water flows over the earth, flows through the sky, flows upward and flows downward. It flows in a single winding brook, and it flows in the 9 great depths. It rises up to form clouds, and it comes down to form pools. Bunshi says, quote, the way of water is to ascend to the sky, forming rain and dew, and to descend to the earth, forming rivers and streams. End quote. Now, even the words of a secular person are like this. It would be most shameful for people who call themselves the descendants of the Buddhist patriarch to be more ignorant than secular people. We can say that the way of water is beyond the recognition of water, but water is able actually to flow. Water is also beyond non-recognition, but water is able actually to flow. It ascends to the sky to form rain and dew. Rain and dew are of various kinds, corresponding to the various kinds of worlds. To say there are places not reached by water is the teaching of Shravakas, of the small vehicle, or the wrong teaching of non-Buddhists. Water reaches into flames. It reaches into the mind and its images, into wit, into discrimination, and it reaches into the realization of Buddha nature. It descends to the earth to form rivers and streams. Remember, when water descends to the earth, it forms rivers and streams. The vitality of rivers and streams can become sages. Common and stupid folk today assume that water is always in rivers, streams, and oceans. This is not so. Rivers and oceans are realized in water. Thus, water also exists in places which are not rivers and oceans. It is just that when water descends to the earth, it takes effect as rivers and oceans. Further, we must not understand that social worlds cannot exist, or that Buddha lands cannot exist at a place where water has formed rivers and oceans. Even inside a single drop, countless Buddha lands are realized. This does not mean there is water within Buddha lands, and does not mean that there are Buddha lands inside water. The place where water exists is already beyond the three times and beyond the world of Dharma. Even so, it is the universe in which water has been realized. Wherever Buddhist patriarchs go, water goes. And wherever water goes, Buddhist patriarchs are realized. This is why Buddhist patriarchs, without exception, when taking up water, have treated it as their body and mind, and have treated it as their thinking. This being so, that water rises up is not denied in any text within Buddhism or without. The way of water pervades upward and downward, vertically and horizontally. At the same time, in the Buddhist sutras, fire and wind rise upward, earth and water settle downward. There is something to be learned in practice in this upward and downward. That is, we must learn in practice the Buddha's teaching of upward and downward as follows. The place where earth and water go, we think of as downward. We do not think of downward as a place where earth and water go. The place where fire and wind go is upward. The world of Dharma should not always be related to measurements upward, downward, and in the four diagonals. At the same time, the four elements, the five elements, the six elements, and so on, relying on the concrete place to which they go, just momentarily establish the four-cornered Dharma world. It is not to be assumed that the heaven of thoughtlessness is above, and that Avicii hell is below. Avicii is the whole world of Dharma, and thoughtlessness is the whole world of Dharma. Still, when dragons and fish see water as a palace, they are probably like people looking at a palace, utterly unable to recognize that it is flowing away. If an onlooker were to explain to them, "Your palace is flowing water," the dragons and fish would likely be as startled as we were now to hear the assertion that mountains are flowing. Further, it may also be possible to maintain and to rely upon the assertion that there is such a preaching in every railing, stair, and outdoor pillar of a palace or a mansion. Quietly, we should have been considering this reasoning, and we should go on considering it. If we are not learning the state of liberation at the face of this place, we have not become free from the body and mind of the common man. We have not perfectly realized the land of Buddhist patriarchs, and we have not perfectly realized the palaces of the common man. Although human beings now are profoundly confident that the inner content of the seas and the inner content of the rivers is water, we still do not know what dragons, fish, and other beings view as water and use as water. Do not stupidly assume that every kind of being uses as water what we view as water. When people today who are learning about Buddhism want to learn about water, we should not stick blindly in the human sphere. We should move forward and learn water in the Buddha's state of truth. We should learn in practice how we see the water that Buddhist patriarchs use. Further, we should learn in practice whether there is water or whether there is no water in the houses of Buddhist patriarchs. Mountains have been the dwelling places of great saints since beyond the past and present. All the sages and all the saints have made the mountains into their inner sanctum, and made the mountains into their body and mind. And by the virtue of the sages and saints, the mountains have been realized. We tend to suppose, with respect to mountains in general, that countless great saints and great sages might be gathered there. But after we have entered the mountains, there is not a single person to meet. There is only the realization of the vigorous activity of mountains. Not even the traces of our having entered remain. When we are in the secular world, gazing at the mountains, and when we're in the mountains, meeting the mountains, their heads and eyes are very different. Our notion that the mountains are not flowing, and our view that the mountains are not flowing, may not be the same as the view of dragons and fish. While human beings and gods in our own world are in our element, other beings doubt this notion and view of ours, or they may not even doubt it. This being so, we should study the phrase, mountains flow, under Buddhist patriarchs. We should not leave it open to doubt. Acting once is just flowing. Acting once more is just not flowing. One time round is flowing. One time round is not flowing. Without this investigation in practice, it is not the right Dharma wheel of the Tathagata. An eternal Buddha says, if you want to be able not to invite the karma of incessant hell, do not insult the right Dharma wheel of the Tathagata. We should engrave these words on skin, flesh, bones, and marrow. We should engrave them on body and mind, on object and subject. We should engrave them on the immaterial, and we should engrave them on matter. They are already engraved on trees and on rocks, and they are already engraved in fields and in villages. We generally say that mountains belong to a country, but mountains belong to the people who love mountains. Mountains always love their occupiers, whereupon saints and sages, people of high virtue, enter the mountains. When saints and sages live in the mountains, because the mountains belong to these sages and saints, trees and rocks abound and flourish, and birds and animals are mysteriously excellent. This is because the sages and saints have covered them with virtue. We should remember the fact that mountains like sages, and the fact that mountains like saints. That many emperors have gone to the mountains to bow before sages, and to question great saints, is an excellent example in the past and the present. At such times, the emperors honor the sages and saints with the formalities due to a teacher, never conforming to secular norms. Imperial authority exerts no control whatever over the mountain sages. Clearly, the mountains are beyond the human world. On Kodo Mountain, in the bygone days of Keiho, the Yellow Emperor visited Kosei, crawling on his knees and kowtowing to beg instruction. Shakyamuni Buddha left the palace of his father, the king, to enter the mountains, but his father did not resent the mountains. The royal father did not distrust those in the mountains who would teach the prince, whose 12 years of training in the truth were mostly spent in the mountains. The revelation of the prince's destiny as the king of Dharma also took place in the mountains. Truly, not even the wheel-rolling kings hold sway over the mountains. Remember, the mountains are beyond the boundaries of the human world and beyond the boundaries of the heavens above. We can never know the mountains with the human intellect. If their flowing is not to be compared with flowing in the human world, who can doubt the flowing, the non-flowing, and the other activities of mountains? Again, since the ancient past, there have been from time to time sages and saints who lived by the water. When they lived by the water, There are those who fish fishes and those who fish human beings, and those who fish the state of truth. Each of these is in the traditional stream of those who are in the water. Going further, there may be those who fish themselves, those who fish fishing, those who are fished by fishing, and those who are fished by the state of truth. In days of old, when Master Tokujo suddenly left Yukasan Mountain to live amidst the river's mind, he got the sage of the Keitei River. Was this not fishing fishes? Was it not fishing human beings? Was it not fishing water? Was it not fishing himself? A person who is able to meet Tokujo is Tokujo. And Tokujo's teaching people is a human being meeting a human being. It is not only that there is water in the world, but there are worlds in the world of water. And it is not only in water that such worlds exist. There are worlds of sentient beings in clouds. There are worlds of sentient beings in wind. There are worlds of sentient beings in fire. There are worlds of sentient beings in earth. There are worlds of sentient beings in the world of Dharma. There are worlds of sentient beings in a stalk of grass. And there are worlds of sentient beings in a staff. Wherever there are worlds of sentient beings, the world of Buddhist patriarchs inevitably exists at that place. We shall carefully learn in practice the truth which is like this. In conclusion, then, water is the palace of real dragons. It is beyond flowing and falling. If we recognize it as only flowing, the word flowing insults water. Because, for example, the word forces water to be what is other than flowing itself. Water is nothing but water's real form as it is. Water is just the virtues of water itself. It is beyond flowing. When we master the flow and master the non-flow of a single body of water, the perfect realization of the myriad dharmas is realized at once. With mountains too, there are mountains contained in treasure. There are mountains contained in marshes. There are mountains contained in space. There are mountains contained in mountains. And there is learning in practice, in which mountains are contained in containment. An eternal Buddha says, mountains are mountains. Water is water. These words do not say that mountains are mountains. They say that mountains are mountains. This being so, we should master the mountains in practice. when we are mastering the mountains in practice, that is effort in the mountains. Mountains and water like this naturally produce sages and produce saints. Preached to the assembly at Kannon-dori Kosho Horinji Temple on the 18th day of the 10th lunar month in the first year of Ninji.